Welcome to the Garden Talk podcast, where we interview growers from all over the world, both beginners and experts, seeking to learn more about what they know about gardening and how they do things in their garden. What's up, everybody? For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris, aka Mr. Grow It, and you're tuned into the Garden Talk podcast. This is episode number 162. In this episode, I interview Josh Grambo. He has been gardening for 12 years and is the producer for both the Dude Grow Show and the Jug Dealers podcast. Grambo studies a lot of different things, one of them being lighting. Here in 2025, what should you look for in a grow light? Is supplementing far red worth it? Is supplementing UV worth it? We get into all of that plus more in this episode. If you want to see short clips of these podcast episodes, search Garden Talk Clips on YouTube. I also have a gardening channel where I show the plants that I grow. Both of those channels will be linked down in the YouTube description section below. One of my goals for this podcast is to bring free information about gardening to the general public. That being said, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's episode who helped me think all possible. Thanks to AC Infinity for sponsoring this episode. Check out their advanced grow kits, which include nearly everything you need to start growing indoors. They have several different size kits, and they all come with a grow tent, grow light, ventilation system, oscillating clip fan, a controller 69 Pro, and so much more. Click the link in the description section below so you can learn more about their grow kits, and the discount code MrGrowIt15 works on both Amazon and their website, acinfinity.com. Stash Blend. Stash Blend is a 2-1-5 plant additive that can be used with synthetic bottled nutrients or in living soil systems. Simply mix half teaspoon of Stash Blend into a gallon of water, then water your plants with it. Ingredients include corn steep liquor, seaweed extract, humic acid, beneficial bacteria, silica, and mycorrhizal fungi. Check it out at stashblend.com, link in the description section below, and use the discount code THESTASH. Spider Farmer. Check out their Genius Grow System AC5 Power Strip Kit. This power strip features 5 independent electrical sockets, allowing you to power and control 5 separate devices. And it can be managed remotely through the Spider Farmer app. You can connect your grow light, clip fan, inline fan, humidifier, and more. More information is linked in the description section below, and discount code MrGrowIt5 works on both Amazon and their website, spider-farmer.com. And we are back, and I'm joined with Josh Grambo. How you doing today?
I'm very well, man. How are you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for asking. Happy to have you on the podcast today to talk all about lighting. This is something that has changed so much over the years, and now we're in a new year, 2025, and I can't wait to pick your brain on things to kind of look for in a grow light. We're going to be getting into so many different topics that relate to lighting. You mentioned to me that you've been doing a lot of research on it, so I'm eager to hear kind of some of the things that you've found out.
Well, the thing about it is that this is it's a plant. This thing's been growing for, hundreds of thousands, millions of years. Like, there's not a ton of new science that comes out week to week as far as like the actual, we found out there's a new nutrient, riboflavin, it needs more riboflavin. And so, it's one of those things like, how do you keep up with what's going on out there? And one of the things that changes week to week is not only the technology of lighting, obviously, with all the different tech that comes out, but also the science of it. It's one of the least understood aspects of lighting. And so when we were talking about what we wanted to talk about, it's like, I'm super hyped on not just the lighting and the technology, but the interaction, your PPFDs, your DLIs, how these different lighting cycles affect what the plant does, how it produces biomass versus the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds that we all like to consume. And that's pretty much been my obsession over the last little bit. So stoked to get to talk about it with you.
That's awesome. Well, before we get too deep into lighting, can we do an introduction? Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into gardening.
Of course. So as some of you may know, my name is Josh Grambo. I'm a comedian here in Denver, Colorado. I've been touring the country for the last couple of years. And then I've been a consumer my whole life, literally my entire, not even my adult life, even going into my adolescent life. And it's always provided for me. Every turn I go, it just seemed like when I was in high school and I didn't know where my friend group was. It's like, I found these super cool guys that are all enjoyed the same sort of stuff, skateboarding and hanging out and all that stuff. And the plants are right there. as part of the lifestyle. And then I need to get out of Iowa where I'm born. I'm from the band Slipknot's hometown of Des Moines, Iowa. And so I got to watch those guys flower and leave eventually. They still have houses there, but it was very, inspiring to watch these guys that I was a freshman to their senior. So I always say I know them, but they don't know me, sort of thing. But I got to watch them go from Des Moines and step up to the big leagues. And I learned that if you put in work, you can actually do things in this world. And that led me to getting out of Des Moines. I was a refugee, essentially. I left Des Moines so I could go to Colorado and, start a family and be safe and work. I fortunately never had any serious interaction with the officials out in the world. So I was able to get away scot-free out of a prohibition land, as we call it. And and then when I got to Colorado, it's very, very expensive here. It's very hard to get around. And once again, the plants provided a way in again. And then as the bottom started falling out of the market and everything started kind of changing and going the way of, what is happening now, that the butterfly cocoon into corporate world that we're going into, there just wasn't that the profit incentive, we'll say, to do it the way I had always been doing it. And so I stepped away and I was like, let me start doing comedy. And I went and I did it. I didn't do it like at the arena level, but I started grinding my way up. It takes years and years of grinding that. And after a big road trip, I did a 5-week tour all across America, started in Florida, ended in Utah, zigzagged from Maine to, Tennessee, Iowa, Minnesota, I think we did 28 states and 35 nights. Had the most fun of my entire life. And we made good money on the trip. And I came home $300 in the negative. And I was like, man, when I get back to Denver, I got to figure out like something that can like be my supplement, like the real thing that I can do to make money and kind of provide, going room to room, playing to 50 people. That's fun. But actually like being able to start a community of my own. And just so happens the week that I got back, the Dude Grow show, which I had been a big fan of, lost their producer. And I had over the lockdown and everything, when stand-up got taken away, I kind of gave myself a mini film school education. And on the outside of that, I didn't know why. I didn't know what I was gearing up for. And turns out what it was gearing up for was to try to spread the message of this plant out to the world. And so it came all of my loves, being funny, making content, and dealing with these plants that we love. It was just a match made in heaven. And as soon as I started in it, I've been obsessed ever since. It's pretty much been my the last 2.5 years. All I do is just think plants, lighting, YouTube, engagement, community. It's been so fun. So the plant provides, and man, it's provided a lot to me.
That's awesome. Yeah, let me just say, you have done an incredible job over at the Dude Grow show, helping produce their shows. A huge increase in quality. It looks like viewership has increased significantly since the old producer to the new producer, you. And so all the changes that you're doing seem to be very positive. You're doing a great job over there. So I just want to say that.
I appreciate it. We had our channel at 88,000 subscribers and was deleted by YouTube for linking out to seeds, which are, 100% fine. I don't know what's going on. And so that was a big kick in the teeth, and that really remotivated me. I could have just joined the team and been like, oh, all right, what do you guys want to do? But when that happened, it's like, well, do we quit? This is a conversation that was had in a meeting. Do we stop doing this? And I was like, we can't. I just through coincidentally, one of the things that brought me to Colorado was growing. And so I had grown for a while, but as I told Grow It before we started, I was like, I killed more plants than I probably grew in my early days. So I knew it was going to pay the rent when I got to Colorado. So I'm dyslexic. I'm not a huge reader. So I'd be on the forums. I'd be on your Roll It Up, your IC Mag, but how much can you really glean from that? And this new thing called podcasting had came out in 2014, not in 2014, but really gained popularity in the 2013, 2014. And I got into the Adam Dunn show and a show called John Doe Radio and this little fledgling group called the Dude Grow show. And so I'd been a fan. Oh, I might be one of their first fans, honestly. I started listening on episode 13 and we just recorded episode 1718 the other day. So man, shout out to those guys for going through the adversity. They get the OG points they did it before it was cool.
Over a decade. Yep. It's incredible contributions there. So, what would you say your grow style is? Do you grow indoors or outdoors? Are you in soil, cocoa, hydro, organic, synthetic? What's your style?
I've always been an indoor guy. It started as like my friend's older brother. He was the guy that introduced me to like consuming and everything. So this is like a family I've known since I was two. Next door neighbors, best friends with the youngest brother, friends with all the older brother. I was a de facto sibling. So when he would go out of town, I would get tapped. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to Hawaii for 2 weeks. Like, I'm going to teach you how to take care of my plants." It's like, "Oh, cool," you know. And pretty much all I remember from that day, he would just yell at me, "More Cal Mag, put more Cal Mag on it." You know, that's all. That's all I remember from that. And then so I was like, well, when I get here, I need to really get my game dialed up. So as I started educating myself, it became quite clear that the easiest, most effective way for indoor cultivation, for at least how I was going to be performing it, was to be into cocoa. I messed around with Pete for a while, and having a day job. I'd be out in the world, and sometimes I couldn't get home in time, and I'd get lazy, and it wasn't exactly like the thing that was the most important to me when I was living in Iowa. It was just kind of like, how do you get good product? Well, you can meet all the people in the world and pay out the nose, or you can get yourself some genetics and just go that way. And so when I started taking it seriously, I was like, I became a Scotty Reel disciple. He was always a growing cocoa sort of guy. So I was like, all right, let me start growing cocoa. Found great results immediately. And what I found is that when I did it right, when I used the nutrient program the way it was designed and gave the plants what they needed in the time they needed, all of a sudden I found I don't even need CalMag. It was one of my early insights of like, the people that taught me might not know as much as I thought they knew. And that hole in my knowledge base, I'm a real like, aggressive learner. I love learning. I used to be a professional poker player. I'm a very, very high level guitar player. I stand-up comedian. I'm a 3D animator with Blender 3D animation software. I just have to learn. And when I have a hole in my knowledge, I get real crazy about it and I have to learn everything. And that's what's kind of cued me on to my journey. That's what became so perfect about getting in the media game is that like I'm not in this just for a paycheck. I literally, the paycheck's great. Pay your rent with The Rock. We're just able to pay our rent through the Patreon supporters and all that sort of good stuff. But I really love a good puzzle. And I think growing is one of the funner puzzles that I've came across. So yeah, cocoa indoor. Went from HPS to LED. That's a whole conversation that, that's what kind of got us going on this topic right immediately as far as lighting. And yeah, so I've learned a lot in the last little bit and it just keeps changing month to month. I'm stoked.
Sounds like you're real passionate about this community and you're real driven to learn more and improve and all that stuff. So that's awesome to see.
Packing nerds, bro. Packing nerds.
So let's get into lighting now. One of the things I want to ask right off the bat, we have a lot of folks who are shopping for grow lights, right? Here in 2025, what should growers look for when purchasing a grow light?
Well, that's the question is right off the bat is what it's kind of like it's the map, where are you trying to go is where you're going to try to get, So like let's say you're in a tent and you're inside your bedroom. I mean, right off the bat, we've kind of nixed HPS out of the picture. We're not going to be able to grow with high intensity lighting in a small tent atmosphere. It's you have to air cool. That's one of the things that's really got me educated on this, like even 10 years ago is, growing in a pre-LED environment where you're stacking lights together in a small room, they all had to be vented hoods. So we'd run air through the hoods so we'd remove all that heat. And the byproduct of that is you were cooling the bulb. And so color temperature, like you'd have like a more orange number for the HPS. And that's an actual temperature. Color is temperature. And so when you're lowering the temperature of the bulb to its actual spec operating thing, you're losing a lot of spectrum. And so I started learning, like, why is it my friends that like have like Gavitas strapped to their ceiling in their giant basement are getting what, the same we'd all share genetics back then. It was tougher. There wasn't all a lot of the genetic banks were over in Europe and stuff, and you'd be ordering off the back of magazines like it was Sea Monkeys or something. It wasn't a lot of trust as far as like the system. So it was really relying on the community. So we all shared genetic. We find things that we liked. We got the forum cut of the cookies like back in the day when it first came out. And I'm noticing these guys are getting way better results than I am. And the only thing that was different is I was venting them. And then turns out, as I started educating myself, sure enough, I was losing a lot of spectrum. You're losing a lot of power that's supposed to be hitting those things. So if you're choosing, I would say there's a lot of controversy right now about HPS versus LED. And one of the things that's very, very interesting is genetic expression, phenotypic expression. I work with the Jug guys, the Jug Dealers over at New Millennium Nutrients. And Jaron always likes to say phenotype is genotype times environment. So you and I have the same cut. We got the same genetic profile, but then you put it outside and I put it in a tent and they're going to express differently. And so I always wondered, where did all the things that I loved in the 2000s, where did they go? I still get the name. Here's the strain you want. And they give it to me and it's got the name and it looks kind of like it, but it didn't taste the same, didn't smell the same, didn't quite look the same. What happened? Was it genetic drift? Was it all the clones were being abused or people lying? Is it not the thing that I did? And then as I started meeting more people, more trustworthy guys that are OGs in the game, I started getting the real stuff. I'd get the real cuts from the real people. They still didn't express. Why is that? And so I started digging in another hole in knowledge and I realized, it's because they're not grown under vented hoods with GH nutrients packed together in a tiny room, VPD out of control, like even bad growing conditions. If there's a phenotypic expression that you enjoy, the only way you're going to get it is through an quote unquote an inferior growing process, because what plants were selected under is what they will thrive under, especially if you're not running things like if you get a genetic and you just take clone from clone to clone, it will acclimate to your environment, but it will never, its code is locked. But when you take something and you breed it, like if you back cross something and you self it against itself and the genetic remains the same, it shuffles the deck. And I always remember that family that I grew up with. I was friends with the youngest brother. Well, the oldest brother, he was like a genetic copy of the mom. The middle brother was like a genetic copy of the dad. And the youngest brother was like a direct split. And I started understanding like, okay, there it is. And when I was dealing with plants, I started getting, recessive genes. I see what's happening. It's like some of the grandparents come in, some of the mom comes in, different eye color, different skin tone, different hair color. It's like, okay, I get it. And then you take the twin brothers and you raise them in different places and they're going to act completely different. Twins raised in the same room finished each other's sentences, yet twins raised across the country can have surprisingly different lives. It all started coming together. And this comes back to lighting, where one of the biggest things that you can do to change your environment is the lighting. So if you chose an HPS versus LED, one of the things that really makes LED superior to HPS is that you don't need the cooling. For a watt is a watt. So if I have 1,000 watt LED and I have 1,000 watt HPS, technically speaking, more light, there's the same exact heat, but the LEDs produce more light for that heat. So your output is there. So it's not that LEDs are cooler or, there's more efficient. So a watt's a watt of heat equals X amount of BTUs, and you're going to get what you get. Turns out that when you measure things like leaf surface temperature, right? When you go in there with a little thermometer gun and you point at the leaf, you need to run your room slightly hotter with LED because there isn't that infrared. There's almost no infrared. That when you see those red diodes in an LED, that's them trying to stick some red in there because they don't come with it. Whereas HPS, high pressure sodium just kicks out the IR. That's why you could feel it, the heat coming off it. That's why if you go to a restaurant, you'll see the IR heaters. You'll have something that isn't glowing. It's not red. It's not hot. To like visually hot. There's no color coming off it. Yet you're getting blasted with this heat that's coming off of it, and that's just a pure IR lamp that's hitting it. You think that that wouldn't have I'll raise the temperature a little bit, but what is kind of interesting is that the leaf surface temperature. It actually affects like the biotic structure of what's going on, like heat stresses and things. Even though there's micro boundary layers that your plant creates, that's why we like a lot of airflow and get them going, and it breaks those micro boundary layers across because it's just got this micro layer of insulation, we'll call it, and so you want to knock that all off. And so just raising the temperature of your room doesn't necessarily get the plant leaf surface temperature all that much higher. Whereas if you bombard it with that IR, it gets it way higher. I was like, oh, so even the things that we kind of consider not valuable in growing, oh, it is affecting the metabolism of the plant. This is why I'm not getting that diesel expression. I want that 2003 diesel, like Lifestyle Rob and I, when we were hanging out in Vegas. So, we're just the right amount of boomer millennial that we remember that 2003 diesel, baby, where'd it go? It still exists. You just have to grow it wrong, according to 2025 standards.
Got it. Yeah, I feel like these days, particularly in the homegrown market, that I feel like a majority of people are going with LED versus the HID. The HID, whether it be HPS or MH or even CMH falls into the HID category, high intensity discharge. But yeah, as far as what to look for when purchasing a grow light, I think first thing right off the bat is coverage area. What area are you trying to cover? If you're looking for a 2 foot by 4 foot coverage area, well, you can filter it down by there, and then you can kind of get into the granular details of what's the power output? What does the light spectrum look like? And then you could even look at like the diodes, drivers. People get really, really deep into what's the BTU, the heat output. So there's a lot of different things that people can look at when they're shopping for an LED grow light. I want to narrow it down to spectrum here. You see a lot of grow light listings that have full spectrum. They advertise full spectrum. Is it safe to say that it's sufficient for growing medicinal plants from seed to harvest if it's labeled as full spectrum?
Of course. One of the things that we'll like to talk about, I work with a company with Jug Dealers, DLI, Dutch Lighting Innovations. And one of their sayings is like, you can get any crappy Chinese light off of Amazon and run it for a year. And that thing will be banging out pretty decent harvest, But as you get to your third run, your fourth run, your fifth run, all of a sudden there's degradation and the light output starts dropping and the power input doesn't drop. So as your efficiency starts, LEDs, cheaper LEDs that you get, they will be, like I said, the watt per output is higher than an HID light. But after year 2, you go measure it, it can drop down. It can get down to half. So you can lose 3/4 efficiency if you don't. So one of the main things is the old saying, buy once, cry once. Get one of the trustworthy companies. I personally, I have 2 tents that I grow in. One has the Dutch Lighting Innovation LED in it. The other's got a HLG Horticultural Lighting Group LED in it. They're both high quality. They both have I almost couldn't tell the difference between the two as like output, although I use one for, vegging mainly and the other for the flower, but it's a big thing. It's also to be considered is a power of your house. That's another reason that LED is so important. Most HID lights are 240. You have to plug it into a dryer outlet or get a special switcher box, then goes into a ballast that then goes into the light. It's so much production. Whereas if you can just get a decent LED light, plug it in to the wall of your bedroom, it's kind of like the reason that there's a renaissance in the game right now is because all of a sudden, there is a time where carbon filters didn't exist. People would spray gels and cologne and crap all over their rooms because how do we get rid of this smell? And so between carbon filtration, then the upgrade in the tent technology, then the upgrade in the lights, all of a sudden, literally everybody for under $1,000, you can get a perfect setup and grow amazing plants. And then all of that sunk cost that you will pay yourself back. However you're getting your material you're putting in your body, however you're getting that, you're paying for it. And it mounts up faster than you think. If you write down $20 here, $50 here, you're going to hit that $1,000 pretty quick. You'll probably spend it. Whereas if you get good equipment, it's going to last for years and you're going to 20x your initial sunk cost. So buy once, cry once, get one of the reputable companies. It's really good. I know Samsung just went out of business. Everything, or not out of business, but out of the LED game. And they're one of the big breakthroughs that gave us this full spectrum. And on that subject, I was always a CRI guy. So this is color rendering index, the sun being 100, right? So we're trying to match our lights against the sun. Like, what is this? And HPS was very low. It's like 50 CRI at best. You mentioned metal halide. That's, or not a metal halide, but ceramic metal halide. And that's what I end up going with. I was growing under a double-ended 315. So I was running 630s as a double bulbed hoods, and the CRI jumped from like 50 up to 80. So when these LED lights came out, well, God, they're like 95. Oh my God. Well, this must be the answer to all my problems. Well, it is and it isn't. If you're growing, once again, that selection problem, if you're growing modern genetics, and a lot of people are growing the modern genetics, and there's no problem with that. I love people hate on the candy strains, the fruit strains. I love it. It's all a place and time. Like I love the gassy stuff, the fuely stuff, the rank, nasty stuff, but there's a place for that sort of stuff. And so these grow lights are great. They mimic the sun almost exactly, but not perfectly. And especially once again, like humans are a great analogy. Some people are grown in the Saharan plains, and they're bombarded with sun. They have darker skin. Some people were raised in the foggy London town and they have light skin so they can try to pull up more stuff. It's the same sort of thing. You put me in the Sahara Desert, I'm not going to get much work done. You want me to work the field, I'm not going to get anything done. Yet you put me in a dark basement, which is ambient light. I know exactly what to do here. That's your plants. If they were bred to be under HPS, that's where they want to be. They'll do fine. They'll exist. If you force me, like you kidnap me and put me in a mine, I'll work. I'll be sunburned as hell, and I'll feel like hell, but I will get the work done. Same with your plant. It will do what you need it to do, but it's not going to do the thing that it did back in the 90s, 2000s. But if you're growing that modern stuff, yeah, no problem. It's literally picture perfect, match made in heaven. I love the LEDs for the ease of use. That's number one.
Yeah, it does make them a lot easier to use. So if full spectrum is sufficient for growing from seed to harvest, how about the companies that have specialized light spectrum that they advertise? Here's the spectrum that we have. Does it actually translate to better results, or is it mostly marketing gimmicks?
Well, company to company, for sure. Some of them, it's just marketing gimmicks, right? The thing that gets me about it is that the trend that's going on amongst I am we have a check your privilege sort of saying around my world. I get it. I hang out with some of the best growers with the best genetics, the best equipment, all the best knowledge, and I get to watch them from afar. What's going on? What are they doing? What are they talking about? And one of the things that's popped up is mixed spectrum. I'm seeing a ton of people like in commercial facilities. They're doing these checkerboards where they're putting an HPS light in between 4 LEDs, and then they'll just be checkerboarded all over. And so it's fat. This is where the science is way not caught up to the bro science, the anecdotal data, the anecdata, if you will. And you hear a lot of people, I see a lot of people, and I'm watching people who's putting food for their children on the table based on these results. And they're swearing, hey, man, I'm getting better results with these mixed spectrums. Confuses me because if we have a full spectrum LED light, right, like it's covering all the bases that the HPS is, right? Well, maybe not necessarily. There's little gaps in the spectrum. If you look at a spectrograph, it's not just like a flat sine wave, it's not just like here it is. It's a squirrely dirly sort of thing. And different compounds are generated by different things. And so, like I mentioned with the infrared, I would have thought as I educated myself there was nothing to do with IR in there, but turns out there is. So all of a sudden I'm like, all right, well, I don't have all the science, and there is not science. The only science that's coming out is done by the lighting companies themselves. You take that with a grain of salt. But when you have all the homies who feed themselves and their children based on these numbers, and they're saying that these mixing of spectrums is having a result, not just on quantity, but also on quality. And I think as we move forward, that's what we're all really trying to hit now. Like the days of yield being number one, I think those are fairly over. And I think quality is king these days.
I totally agree with you on that one, it seems, except for the the commercial facilities. We do have quite a few people that are working in commercial facilities, and they still have a hammer coming down on them, trying to get more yield, from the uppers. For the most part, quality, but there are still some folks that have to strive for yield because their business relies on it, I guess you could say. I want to get a little bit deeper into far red light, which is something that you had mentioned a little bit here. Can you talk to us about far red light, specifically between 700 and 750 nanometers? What does it do to the plant? And then also, is it worth supplementing far red light, or do most grow lights have enough far red that it's not worth supplementing?
Well, it's this is something that this is like something I've been hearing about for 10 years, but once again, still is ever evolving. It's funny. We recorded an episode of the Jug Dealers podcast the other day, and I happen to know, once again, I've been in the world. I've watched certain people use far red to effective results for the most part. And then I'm talking with these guys here, Jaron and Gabe, two of my most like respected grow brains in all the thing. And they both look me in the eye and they're like, "You're wrong." And I go, "Bro, well, I was like, I thought they were going to be, yeah, of course, the flower initiation, that stuff works." And they're like, "No, doesn't do anything, doesn't exist in nature." I'm like, "Whoa." So this controversy, this goes deep. Like this is one of those controversial things. There's the red and there's the UV we'll get to. I find that to be not since organic versus synthetic have we had as much debate in the growing community. And so as far as the far red, some people can be confused right off the bat, so we should probably clarify that. I mentioned the red earlier as the IR, the infrared. And so when, as Grow mentioned, the PAR, when you see a PAR chart, it's what does a plant see? Think of it like the visual spectrum of a human, right? We don't see X-rays and gamma rays. We don't see microwaves and radio waves, but we see visible light. Same sort of thing with the plant. It's got a visual spectrum that it can see, but just the same way as X-rays sure as hell affect us if we're bombarded with them. Same thing. Things outside of the PAR range also affect the plant. And so infrared is outside of that PAR range, way outside of it. And so it's like I said, that's why it's interesting. It's like, oh, it's outside of PAR, yet it still does affect the metabolism of the plant. There's also that's infrared. Now we're discussing far red. So that is slightly on the end. It's just dipping over the side of the PAR range, a little bit in, a little bit out. And it does quite a bit of sort of stuff. It's a lot of negative stuff as well as positive. One of the main things that I think, as I can speak, is there's not a ton of science out there as far as this stuff. Once again, it's a lot of the companies, and I trust a lot of the companies. Shane from MyGrow, I trust this guy. There's certain characters out there. Jair from the Dutch Lighting Innovations, I trust him. So when these guys say things, I listen, and so we can start with the negative sort of effects that the far red will have. So far red is just like, if you can think like the reason the X-rays are so powerful is they're a really small wave. They're very intense. It takes a lot of energy. Like if I want to make something like jiggle fast, I got to put a lot of energy with it. And so versus a radio wave, right? It's this giant, huge thing. It can wrap over your house and still get a signal on the next one. Whereas if I shot, an X-ray burst at your house, it's going to hit the wall. It can't go over. It's too small of a wavelength. And so you can think of the far red kind of like that. It's a bigger thing. So it can get past your canopy. It can get past your leaves. It can get down lower. So if you have a forest and you've got a bunch of trees that are shading out a little plant that's trying to grow down there, our little favorite high valued plants that we like to grow, if we put that underneath a giant forest canopy, right, it's not going to get any of that delicious PAR that we're talking about. But what it is going to get is some of that far red, because it can get through the canopy and it still hit it. And what that tells the plant is stretch, baby, stretch. You're not getting any of the yummy light that we need to grow. We're getting all that red light. And that means that there's light above us, but we ain't getting it. So we got to grow up there. So one of the things that I've seen a lot is people that will use their far red lights all cycle, is that they're getting a lot of stretch. Now, some people like the stretch. This is an interesting thing of at the 5.8 Jug Dealers guys, we like to say it's like, think of like a bloom booster, right? Is like an additive, right? It's not required. It's going to get you farther. I think of like these UV, the far red, things like that. These are the additives that we're adding, and some genetics need more CalMag. That's where it came from. Some need less. Some need, so same thing. Some genetics, some cultivars, as we're now calling them, they, probably should have always been calling them. Strains are for mushrooms and flus. Cultivars are for plants, just to clear up any, we still call it strains. You can still say it. No one's, don't be a snickerpuss. Don't talk down to someone because they say strain. We get it, cultivar, but some of these cultivars, they need more than others. And so if you got like these little tiny squat plants that you want to grow up, maybe you have techniques for increasing that internodal spacing. One of the reasons we don't like stretching is because it takes node to node of those flower sites and increases it. And then you get these giant top heavy things that want to bend and break, and you're having to give them more silica so that way they have a little bit more elasticity to them, and everything just gets changed. So if you're one of these like high level thinking growers, like my buddy from Threes Genetics, JLS Monster, he's one of the best breeders in Colorado, and he was like, I run my far red mid cycle. I like a little stretch. Like he'll grow this Colonel Chem that I love. I got some of it sitting over here, and man, amazing. He's like, it's too squat. The nodes are too together. I sometimes I get bud mold. Okay, I would have never thought. Like, okay, maybe this guy wants stretch because he's getting botrytis at the end of his harvest. He's like, this loosens up some of those tight flower sites. And okay, I'm learning. Holy crap! Here's another thing. I would have been like, that's bad. I could say, that's bad. Stretching is bad. Is it? Not if that's exactly what you want to keep your plants, keep you happy and healthy. So on the positive side of it is the flower initiation. This one, my friends have legit been doing forever. You can think of it just like I talked about with how red are these big giant things. Well, before our eyes can actually see the sunrise, we're actually starting to get bombarded. That's why it starts to heat up a little bit before the sun even comes up. We're getting hit with that IR first. It's the biggest. It's coming down. It's cooking up our atmosphere. And then that far red is coming in. And so even though the sun hasn't crested the horizon yet, it's still throwing some of that far red that our eyes can't necessarily even see, but the plants can. And that tells them to wake up. Same conversely, when the sun starts to go down, it crosses the horizon, and then all that visible light is blocked by the horizon, yet some of that red is still so big, just like the x-rays hitting your house versus the radio hitting your house. You can hit the radio in a big city, even though it's blocked, your plant sees, there's that outgoing red. Time to go to sleep. So people have called this the flower initiator. You'll run it for 15 minutes before your lights turn on and 15 minutes after your lights turn on. This tells them that it is fully time to wake up and fully time to go to bed. And they will go, it takes your plants, an hour to, so I once again, cultivar specific. Some plants go to sleep very, very fast and some other take forever. Just like people, it's almost like life is like life. They're so much like us. It's almost spooky. And so it will tell them, wake up, go to bed, and they go faster. And then so they're able to produce sugars and auxins at night and interchange with the roots, the roots and the shoots, as we call them. They both are doing different roles. One's creating oxygen. People always think that plants, they create CO2. Well, did you know their roots create oxygen? That's why terrariums can exist. Blew my mind when I started learning. You can put a plant in a sealed bottle and it will live because its roots are producing oxygen and its the flowers are producing CO2 and it can circulate through the two. Blew my mind. And so if you start shortening those days, or not shortening your days, but getting them to go to sleep faster, you're actually day after day in a 60 to 80 day flower cycle, you're actually pulling several days off. Some people are saying, I'm pulling a week off of my plants. This is the point I try to make with Jaron and Gabe on the Jug Dealers show, is where they're like, no, it doesn't do anything. And I was like, I think we're talking quality. I don't think it does anything to increase quality. You're not going to get more oil and those VOCs from this, but you're taking time off of your schedule. So it's more, I guess this could be lumped into the yield category, because if you can jam another harvest in your garden each year, even if you're losing a little bit of weight run to run, you're gaining that weight back plus by jamming a whole extra harvest in there. And I think that's something we all can get down with.
Got it. Yeah. So there are definitely pros and cons. And it sounds like that con that you mentioned is really subjective, right? Actually, I had somebody on the podcast pretty recently, Dave Baker, shout out to him. He was on there talking about autoflowers And one thing that was pretty interesting is he actually uses the far red for autoflowers because he wants that stretch. He wants that veg growth to happen. You know, he wants the biggest plant as he possibly get. In an autoflower, obviously, we all know that it's limited on its time frame for veg. It automatically flips to flower, right? So that veg time frame is super, super important. If there's any stunt growth, you could have a significantly smaller plant. So he utilizes far red, supplements far red in order to get a bigger stretch on his autoflowers before they actually flower. So I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting. And this is what learning looks like. People ask questions like, how do you know that? And I go, because someone smart told me it once and I listened. Autoflowers, that's fascinating because exactly like I talked about, like getting bud rot and stuff. That's usually an outdoor sort of thing, you know. But a lot of people do get it indoors, and I could totally see you get that giant Christmas tree. You can't really top an autoflower the way we would top a normal photoperiodic plant. So you get this giant Christmas tree cola going up. I could see totally increasing that internodal length, gives you more room for those buds to grow, tells them there's more space for them. This makes sense to me.
Absolutely. So would you say it's worth adding in, like for people to actually go out and buy the lights to supplement? Or is it just kind of like a plant additive where you can get it, but it's kind of like an optional thing and it'll take you a little bit further, but it might not be worth it for some?
So you can type into Google image search at some point after this podcast, everyone listening, just type law of the minimums chart or graphic, the law of the minimums, right? So if you take a barrel and it's all got level sides, right? You can fill the water up to that level of the barrel. Now you take one plank of that barrel and you hammer it down 5 inches, right? Well, the height of what that barrel can contain is now its lowest point. Right? That's just what it is. The water is going to flow out that hole until it reaches to that equilibrium point of that lowest plank. And that's your new water level. You pull that plank up. Now you can fill it all the way back up. And it's a great chart. I think it's Lee Biggs' law of the minimum. I can never remember exactly the fella's name. I learned from college educated people, yet was not college educated. So I have a hard time retaining some of it's a knowledge fire hose out there these days, It's hard to maintain all this stuff, you know? So yeah, look up law of the minimums. And I would say for sure, we'll say this even about something as pedantic as CO2. Don't worry about it until everything else is dialed in. If you're not hitting your DLI, your preferred PPFD, you're not even going to be able to you're going to get. That's another thing about giving it more light. It's this weird cause and effect loop, right? Don't worry about having CO2 if you don't have enough light. And then don't worry about putting more light in if you don't have CO2. It's like a weird all apes are monkeys, or all monkeys are apes, but not all apes are monkeys sort of thing. It, like, depending on what you're doing is. So I would say for sure, just a short answer to the question is, yeah, it should be one of the last things you're worrying about. But if you have your room dialed in and you're like, I don't know how I could possibly make it any better. Yes, now we're talking. You're the person that should be kind of thinking about that. But if you're a new grower, you're buying your first tent, you're like, should I buy some far red? No. Your light will contain enough to be perfectly adequate.
I think that's a good way to put it. Now, how about ultraviolet light, UV light, 100 to 400 nanometers? What does that do to the plant? And is that worth supplementing? Or do most grow lights have UV in the spectrum that supplementation isn't really necessary?
So here we go. This is the one that puts fear in my chest, because all of a sudden, I'm a man of science, right? I study quantum mechanics for fun. I love the particle zoo. You want to talk about how time dilation works with muons, life cycle being shorter than they can get from the Earth to the sun, yet they crash in with the Earth every single millisecond forever. How is that possible? I'll talk that for you forever, right? I am a man. I love science. I love it. Questioning science is part of science, folks. I know we live in the most divisive times ever. And when you say things like, you can't believe the science, you get put in a category, right? Of like, you're a political person. You're over here. You voted for this person. All sorts of crap gets brought up. So I, with a big asterisk, go into this next subject, is that, once again, there's not many people doing science on this. And the people that are doing the science are scientists. They're not like consumers the way we are there, where they're not looking at it from the perspective that we're looking at it, right? So just what this is, we totally planted a fertile bed of seeds for everyone's knowledge base that now we can catch up to this because expression, right? Different plants, different cultivars, different genetic profiles, recessive, all these different things are affected by different things. So now I'm a scientist. I have to do things one at a time. I can't test multiple variables simultaneously. I have to get a baseline, agree with my peer group that this is the baseline. And then when I want to change something, I change one variable and then I get more results. Then I'll go back, I'll change something else. And you start doing these one-to-one tests over and over and over and over again, thousands of times. And then a full data set that's full and useful starts to emerge. Well, we only have a handful of guys, and one of the ones that gets thrown in my personal face every single day of talking about this would be our esteemed member of this community, Bruce Bugsby. I love Bruce Bugsby very, very much. This guy is a genius, but the man is a scientist. So when he talks about things like, I'm burying the lead here. A guy like Bruce Bugsby says UV does not affect plants, right? We've done the studies. It's not creating more oils. It's not creating more cannabinoids. It's not creating more flavor molecules. It's just not. Well, I happen to live in Denver. I work for the Dutch Lighting Innovations. I work with these guys very closely. They're part of my friends' friends, and they sell a purpose-made UV light. It's a HID. It's not HPS necessarily. It's inspired by it, but it's a UV just light. It's a burning ball of gas that's just like the sun putting off all that UV. That's what's growing here. It's one of the only full spectrum UV lights. There's UVA, there's UVB, and there's UVC. You can think of A as just ambient, as Scotty Reel on Dude Grows like to say. B stands for burn, and C stands for cancer. It hurts you. UVC is not good. So in our Earth's atmosphere, thankfully, since UVC is so dangerous for us, it filters out almost all of the UVC. But we still get a lot of the UVB and a lot of the UVA. And so they come out with a light that directly mimics that. It costs money, and I'm watching people all over put it in and keep it. And I'm saying, what's going on? So my friend Turpicana Kyle, he's one of the best growers I've ever met. I know this guy for 10 years. He is literally the smartest man as far as like hands-on plants. He loves the science. He loves the data. He loves talk and grow. And he goes, I'm going to try it. And it's just the way that a scientist would only do one variable at a time. He had his room dialed in. What else can I do? He's looking for terpene production. He calls his company Turpicana. And it's all about those terps. And so he's like, let me try it. And he's instantaneously, he's like, dude, after 3 runs, I'm getting this, once again, anecdotal. He's like, I'm getting like 8 to 10% more terpenes as you do. He'll do BHO runs of the oils, and it fractionates, and so you'll get like a crystalline layer. You'll get like and it's different, and at the very, very tippy top is just pure terpenes, and so you can scoop those off. You can weigh them. You can actually do data. And he's like, man, I'm getting 10% more terps off of this stuff. One of the other things that UV will do, once again, so that's why I preface with that there's controversy here. You got groups of people in the academic community saying that it does nothing. You got groups of people in the hands-on practitioners, and they're saying it does. So that's why I press. I'm a man of science, but in the aspect of UV, I'm choosing, because I believe the science isn't in yet. The data that we have is pointing at a suggestion, but I don't take that at face value yet. Maybe in 2030, if there's all these tests are going and there's more and more and more bug bees of the world all confirming this, I'll go, okay, maybe my friends are full of crap and they got that 10%, not full of crap, but they did get that increase. Maybe there's some other variable that they weren't aware of. But as it stands now, I believe that it does. And, but one consequence is if you are a yield person, it reduces biomass, but it increases we think of the trikes and everything, all that is all the oils. That's the sunscreen. It puts it on there as a protective layer. It doesn't want things landing on it. It doesn't want bombarded by all that UV. So we like positive stressors in our world. I'm a big, some people do the low stress training. I'm a high stress trainer. Boy, I bust, I'm breaking necks in there. I love it. And just like, you'd see like old, you know, fucking John Claude Van Damme, movies, and they're punching gravel, and they're creating microfractures in their hands. And when those microfractures fill in with all the calcium and things that we take, you're stronger and beefier, and you got these giant things. Well, we've all seen if you break a plant, it gets this giant knuckle on it, right? And well, my buddy Jay Maestro, he goes, well, to hell with knuckles. I want my whole plant to be a knuckle. So I'm popping everything. My plants just look dead. People I grow with are just like, what have you done? You've killed it, you monster. 24 hours later, it's right back to praying. It's all good. So we're trying to create positive stressors. And UV, I believe, is one of the most positive stressors you can get. Now, you can't work under this. It is bad for you. So in these commercial facilities that do have these, they run them about 3 hours a day, and people can't be under them. They are quite dangerous. Don't play games with UV. You can get the light. Here's another thing about UV is that you talked about shady marketing practices. Here's where the shadiest marketing practices come out is the different types of UV. Best UV out through glass from a bulb. These high pressure bulbs, the UV, the Dutch lighting UV bulbs, that's the best. Hands down, it's the only product that's like that on the market. After that, you get the bars. You have these bars. The bars work. The bars are great. You can get good UVA out of it. You can get a little bit of UVB. No C, obviously, and we don't want too much C anyway. So I also like the bars. Once again, Migro, no relation to them. Just like the guys, they educate the world. They give it out for free and say, if you like what we give you, come try our products. Well, I have friends that have tried it and had good results so far. Then we get to the LEDs. That is a no-go. LEDs cannot maintain UV. So think about if you put a red chair out in the sun, bright red chair, right? Big, you got this lawn chair. It's all right. It's cherry red. It's gorgeous. Now you put it out there for a couple summers. You go out there. It's like light pink after a couple years. Why is that? Because all that UV light is breaking it down. It attacks plastics and it just degrades them quite quickly. Well, your LEDs are essentially made of these different plastic molecule polymers and such, and they break down. So literally, as you're running UV through these things, they are degrading themselves. So just like I talked about spectral degradation of cheaper LEDs, there is no LED on Earth. It's literally breaking itself from the inside. So maybe you'll get a couple weeks of great production out of some of these diode-based UV systems, but they're gonna break themselves pretty quickly. And now you're just running heat in your garden to a light that is producing near nothing. So that I would say go with the full spectrum glass, then the bars. Avoid the LEDs.
Good to know. Now you mentioned DLI quite a few times here in this podcast. I want to get deeper into it. I have a lot of beginners on this podcast. Some might not even know what DLI is. Can you explain what is DLI and what do you aim for?
So I had kept referencing DLI. It's a clever company name, Dutch Lighting Innovations. That's not what we're referencing here. They kind of took that as like their cute name of like, DLI. What it actually means as far as like botanical means is daily light integral. How much light can a plant absorb in a day? Think of your plant as a bucket and photons like raindrops. How much can it actually hold? And once a bucket's full, it's full. And so the DLI of your plant is how much of those raindrops of energy can it hold per day? How much does it need to be called a day? Here's one of the things that really got me, like one of those knowledge gaps that's like, oh, I got to do some homework. This is fascinating. I've been growing 10 years before I learned. We call it a photo period, right? What we should really call it is like an anti-photo period or lack of photo period. Here's the thing that actually dictates your photo cycle is the nighttime. This blew my mind. Scotty and I at Dude Grows, we'll enjoy our favorite compounds late at night, and we'll have discussions all about this. It's all we ever talk about. And we started thinking about this insane concept, right? We play God with our plants, right? We give them, we let there be light, we say, and so there is light. That is, we have that level of control. They don't know what a 24-hour day is, right? So think about if you had a cultivar, especially that was not hungry for light and you hit its DLI super early, what necessarily, because you're the photo period is the 12 hours of dark. That's what creates a flower cycle. And so we can't interrupt that. We don't want to interrupt that all that much. It'll create a lot of stressors in the plants. Maybe that's what you're looking for. Some people I know, like our friends in Southern Colorado down there, will they recommend certain like, do a 16-8 sort of thing. And that creates controversy. It works for them. They like that. Positive stressors, maybe they're trying to stress their plant in a manner there, but just to keep it, we want our genetics stable. We don't want them selfing, doing any sort of weirdness, throwing nanners or anything. So we want to make sure we hold that 12 hours of darkness, but there's nothing special about that 12 hours of light. All we need is to hit our DLI. Hypothetically speaking, Mr. Grow It, what if we had a plant that had a low DLI. We've got a high intensity light or LED that's really kicking those photons down, and we hit our DLI in 8 hours. Couldn't we theoretically just cut this show, give them the 12 hours, and now we've got a 20-hour day? A 20-hour day, and what's that going to do for... If we're talking about flower initiators sneaking in an extra harvest, could you sneak in another harvest? Could we be doing 6 or 7 runs a year? All of a sudden my head starts going crazy. I start looking into it. There's these like gas lamp techniques where they will do things like give veg plants an hour like mid-cycle, all this crazy stuff. I recommend going through the old forums. So much of it is bro science, but so much of it still works. One of the things that blows my mind about science is how much the old boys were right. Holy crap. You were right. I don't know how you knew that, but you were actually right about it. So yeah, there's a lot of old tests. So here we are thinking like, I thought Scotty was like, no, there's been these different light schedule sort of things before. I'd never heard of it. A 20-hour day. That's unheard of. A 9-day week. What are we doing? So all of a sudden it became like the main thing I was thinking about. I was like, man, is there any place that documents DLI of cultivars? Like, see how like, we're so infantile in our knowledge of these things. Like there is so much room to grow, no pun intended, as growers. Like, holy crap. Like, is there anyone leave a comment. There's a great time right in this video, right below. You have any experience with this? Because I'm going to check back the comments. And I like Andrew Huberman calls it anecdata. So anecdotal stories from your smart friends. It's not just anecdotal. It's anecdata, man. That counts. You tell me things work. You're a smart guy and I believe you, and you have a little bit of your own data to prove it. I believe it. So leave a comment. I want to know. I'm going to read them.
Yeah, I think DLI is one of those things that isn't talked about as much as it should be, in my opinion, right? A lot of people just go after the PAR. How much PAR and PPFD are you giving your plants, right? But having the light cycle, knowing how long your lights are on and how much PAR you're giving, running those numbers through a DLI calculator, which you can find online just by doing a Google search, and then figure out how much DLI your plants are actually getting. And then is that too much or is it not enough? And, for medicinal plants, around 40, I think is safe. I've heard upwards of 60 DLI. What do you have a specific number that you kind of aim for DLI or what?
These are so I unfortunately had a little relationship ending over COVID. They were being locked down together for a couple of years. We got on each other's nerves a little bit. I had my mom pass away and all sorts of drama went on in that couple of years. And so I went from growing in amazing grow rooms. I'd never grown in a tent my whole life. I've been growing 10 years, I always had grow rooms, giant 2-car garages, fully sealed, nothing gets in, nothing gets out. Is the glory days. And so I just started growing in tents this last year. And then I just moved to my new apartment. So here in the last 2 years, while I've been increasing all of my grow knowledge, my anecdata has not been there. I haven't had my friends or my hands in the dirt doing it. So I get all the different reports from my friends like you telling me oh, okay, these are the numbers. But the way my brain works is since I don't, I'm not in there with the Photon app or all these different things that come out, checking out what the PPFD and everything is. I don't have my personal personal recommendations. So I don't have numbers for you. Like I said, I'm a man of science. I do not ever want to come on a big platform like this and spew anything that's out of pocket. So I will defend UV. I won't give you a DLI based on my personal experience because I don't know. And it's tough. You can burn up your plants a little bit. You can have a little bit of that. You got to make sure that's where the CO2 comes in. If you are going to increase that DLI and especially that PPFD, and I believe PPFD is photosynthetic photon flux density. I always say you go from stoner to quantum mechanics in 4 moves in this game. It's ridiculous. You go, well, you do it like this. Why? Well, because radiation of light goes like this. Why? Oh, well, because as different photons go. Why? Because quantum mechanics, I don't know.
That's so funny. Yeah, well, I appreciate your honesty there. Not everybody knows everything. Man, this hour has flown by. We are coming up towards the end here. And we just scratched the surface when it comes to lighting. There is so much more that can come with this conversation. Maybe we can do a part 2 in the future where we can go even further on this. But we're going to wrap things up here. Can you tell listeners how they can find you and what you have upcoming in the future?
Well, the number one thing I'd say is my Instagram. I'm at Josh Grambo, JoshGrambo, and Grambo was his name. It's like Rambo, but I'm a G. One of those sort of things. And so, yeah, I'm a stand-up comedian. I got taken off of the road to, I'm an entertainer, not just stand-up. I'm a musician. I actually have a themed band coming soon, Possession with Intent. It's like a metal band. I'm talking with I Can THC. He's a rapper. I've been trying to get him to, come on, Matt, let's start a band, bro. So like I got a lot of dogs in the fire. All of the YouTube stuff, it takes care of itself. The community, I don't have to tell you, our community that we share in this growing community, it is hands down the best community. I've worked in many different fields doing production as I cut my teeth on my way to find this. I worked for a sleep education company. It just taught you how to sleep better and feel better. And we get flamed every day by haters and nonsense and crazy spammers and all sorts of weirdness. I can't believe how good this community of growing is. And so you guys, you'll see in the comments, people are forced. This video has got 400 people watching it and only 50 likes. Get in there and like it. It's like, whoa, chat's like hurting everyone to like and share and everything. That's awesome. But so yeah, the community, that takes care of itself. But if you want to help me, go follow me on Instagram. Helps me get more gigs as far as comedy, helps my reach. If you own a bar, a tavern, you want me to come as Grambo the comedian, Grambo the grower, I will show up in force with my funny friends, my knowledgeable friends. We'll do your events. All the Jug Dealers guys, we're going to Spanibus this year. So here in the next few weeks, we're going to be heading over to Spain for Spanibus, hanging out with Adam Dunn and Jaron and all the guys over there. So I'll be super stoked for that. So if you're interested about all this knowledge and weirdness, go follow me over there on Instagram at Josh Grambo. That's the main thing that supports me. Other than that, just keep growing the dank, baby.
Awesome. Yeah, this community totally is just so incredible. I was in the other communities before, and this is like no other. The friendliness is unmatched. I'll definitely have a link to Grambo's Instagram down in the YouTube description section below, so you can easily get to it and give him a follow. Also want to give a shout out to the folks supporting on Patreon. Patreon.com/Mr. Growit. Your support is greatly appreciated. The folks that are being scrolled on the screen right now are in the producer tier. Special thanks to you. Well, Grambo, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast today. This has been awesome. Just that lighting is one of those things where I really enjoy talking about and listening to the new information that's out here. And thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Love it so much, man. That was my goal, and I feel achieved. So grow on.
All right, everyone. Peace out. Catch you in the next episode.